4th of July is just around the corner, so I thought I would remake this festive dessert that I made a few years ago and share it. This is She's Making Something, and today I'm making a red, white, and blue cake roll to celebrate America's Independence Day. The one I made a few years ago used a recipe that involved a doctored white cake mix, and it turned out pretty well, but this time I wanted to try from scratch. Most recipes I found involved whipping egg whites separate and folding them into the batter, but since I'm adding food coloring to my batter, I didn't want that extra stirring to mess with sensitive egg whites. I ended up finding this recipe on a website called Sugary Sweets, spelled with an H in sugar, and since it uses full eggs instead of splitting the egg whites and yolks, I thought I would give it a try. The list of ingredients are on the screen, and first you whip up the eggs, then add the sugar and wet ingredients, and then the dry ingredients. The powdered sugar is not in the batter, that's used later when rolling it up. Once the cake batter was made, I split it into two roughly equal portions so I could add the festive red and blue colors. I couldn't find my dark blue food coloring, so I gave up and used a lighter neon blue, which wasn't the best choice because when vanilla cake bakes, it turns a golden yellow, which mixes with the blue to give the cake more of a greenish tint than the blue I was hoping for. So next time I will go and get some more real blue food coloring, like the No Taste Red I used to get that bright red color. This cake bakes on a jelly roll pan, which is a cookie sheet with edges, and this one is 10 by 15 inches. First you line it with parchment paper, and then give it a generous coat of cooking spray. I poured the batter into the pan, taking turns between the colors to give a general diagonal stripe effect. I was clearly not picky about straight lines and even measurements. The only thing that mattered to me was that there was a variation parallel to the short sides of the pan, because that is what will be seen when the cake is cut. I wanted both colors to be visible in each slice, so having just diagonal kind of splotches worked really well. This is such a shallow pan, so it only needs to bake for 11 minutes at 375 degrees Fahrenheit. While I waited for it to bake, I took a clean kitchen towel a little bigger than my pan and dusted it with the powdered sugar mentioned in the recipe. After the cake is baked, it gets immediately flipped onto the prepared towel. The parchment paper it was baked on gets removed and a clean sheet placed on top. This extra step helped make sure that the oils on the used sheet don't solidify during cooling and cause any sticking later. Then the whole thing, towel, cake, and parchment paper, gets rolled up together starting from the short end. The hot cake is now all spiraled up, and by letting it cool in this position, it basically locks the shape into the cake's memory, and it'll be less likely to crack when it's rolled up again with the frosting. I set the roll aside, take a moment to clean my counters, and then forget about it for a while because it needs to cool at least an hour before adding any frosting. Speaking of frosting, most cake rolls that I have seen used whipped cream as their filling, but I took it a step further and mixed up 4 ounces of softened cream cheese with a half cup of sugar and a few teaspoons of vanilla, and then I folded in 8 ounces of whipped cream. This is the same frosting I used for fruit pizza, and I could eat it by the spoonful. Once the cake has cooled to room temperature, I gently unroll it and remove the parchment paper. There is clearly a spot where I didn't mix in the red food coloring enough, but that's okay because I slathered the entire cake with raspberry jam. Any sort of jam would work. I like using strawberry as well, but I went with raspberry this time because I like how it blends with the cream cheese. I think because I used jam, this is technically a jelly roll and not a cake roll. Or maybe the filling has to be only jelly for it to be a jelly roll? Well, if anyone knows the official nomenclature for this creation, please let me know in the comments so I can no longer be an ignoramus. The frosting I made starts to stiffen up pretty quickly, and setting up the camera wasted some time, so it was a little thick when I started to spread it on the cake. Some extra patience and gentleness was needed, but I got it frosted. And now it is time to roll the whole thing back up again for the final time. This is where the powdered sugar on the towel comes in handy, as it'll make it a little easier to pull the cake away from the towel as I'm rolling it up. Roll it tightly so there's no air gaps. And look at all that frosting oozing out the side. That means it's rolling up nice and tight. All that extra frosting that squeezes out marks the bottom of the roll, and that is the side that gets put on the serving dish. And my towel will get rinsed and washed. I tidy up the sides with my spatula, showing off that nice spiral of cake. And there are lots of different ways to decorate a roll. Some leave it uncovered, some cover it with ganache or frosting. I chose not to completely cover mine in frosting so that the blue and red remains clearly visible. I started piping some drizzle zigzag lines, but after adding the sprinkles, I decided it didn't look right, so I filled it in and smoothed it out, and then finished it off with more of the blue and red sprinkles. The finished roll gets put in the fridge to harden up a little so it doesn't just smush and fall apart when you cut into it. And this step is crucial for me because the most satisfying part of a cake roll, besides eating it, is watching every spiral piece be sliced and lifted away, revealing the next spiral waiting just behind it. If you want to see more videos like this one, please let me know by hitting that thumbs up button. And subscribe if you want to get notified the next time I'm making something. Thanks for watching!